Let's move to our next topic, that is cloning. The question is, what is cloning? When you want to create the copy of one object into another object with the same values, then you use this concept called cloning. Okay, and cloning is of two types. One is shallow cloning, another is known as deep cloning. Now I am showing you here one example of cloning. Okay, we first see cloning example and then we will look into the other types of cloning, shallow cloning and deep cloning, one by one. So let's first see this cloning example. I have a student class which is having roll number and name, and I'm initializing them using constructor. Okay, now there are two values only, might be there could be 10 values. Okay, in that case, if I want to create student class object and I pass 10 values there, and then let's suppose for another object also I want to have same values, then I have two options here. One is I can do call by reference concept. There I can pass the reference of first object, and then using that reference I'll assign the values of one object or existing object into the new object that we already have seen in call by value and call by reference. But in that case also I need to additionally create one method which will take object reference, and then we have to define all the mappings of copying the values from one object to another object. Instead of doing this, we have one inbuilt feature that is known as cloning. We can use this feature directly, and using this feature we can create the clone of one object directly and create another object with the same values. How we can implement this? Let's see this. First of all, we have to implement cloneable interface to the class for which we want to create the clone object. Okay, cloneable interface is a marker interface, which means this interface is empty, and this is only marking up my class that my class is having that privilege or having that capability that we can create the clone of that object. Okay, that's the first step we need to do. Second step, we need to override this clone method. This clone method is already defined in object class, so from there it is coming and we need to override it. Now when I'm overriding it, you can see two things very interestingly. One is we are using public access modifier because clone method in object class is of protected type. So when we are overriding it, either we have to use the same access modifier or we have to have a bigger scope to overriding the clone method, and that's why I am taking public access modifier here. Secondly, I am defining the return type as object type because clone method in object class is of object return type. Okay, that's why the same return type I am using, because you might need to return any class type of object. And as you know, object class is a parent of all classes. That's why we have a common return type as object class type to return any type of object from my clone method. Okay. Secondly, you can see I am using here throws clone not supported exception. This is a checked exception. Okay. And checked exceptions must need to be handled or need to be further forward to the calling chain, need to be used as throws and then can forward them into the calling chain. Why we are forcefully forwarding them in the calling chain, you are going to learn it in exception handling. So as of now, if you want, you can avoid this, but I'm telling you there are two options you can do. One is either you can use throws keyword and forward that in calling chain, or second is super dot clone you can put in try catch and there you will handle it because this is going to throw checked exception. Okay, now, in the return statement, what I am doing is I am using super.clone. I'm making the call of parent class clone method, and that parent class is nothing but object class. So object class clone method is going to execute, and that will automatically create the clone of your class object and then return that object from there to here. And again, you are further returning it from this clone method to from wherever you are calling this clone method, the object is going to be returned back. Okay. Now you can see I have another class which is the main class. I am first of all instantiating student class with some values, and then I want to create the clone of the student class object. How I can do this? I am simply calling s1.clone. So this clone method is going to execute, right? And this clone is going to call parent class clone method, object class clone method. That clone method is going to execute and return the clone object for this student object here. And from here, it will back again to this place, and from there we are going to hold the reference of that newly created clone object. Okay, and then we will print the values of both of the objects. Let me run this, and you can see I'm getting the same values for both of the objects. That means parent class clone method is creating exactly same clone object with the same values for me, which is clone of student1 object. Okay, creating as student2 object, and we are printing the values and getting the values. Now there is one question can be asked, that is, if we do not override this clone method, and as you know, cloneable is a marker interface, that means it doesn't contain any method there, and it is also not forcing me to override any method. Okay, it's just marking up my class, it's telling that this class is having that capability to create the clone of the class object. Okay, so we are not enforced to have clone method here. And then also, if we call s1.clone, actually the clone method which is coming from the object class must be execute. Then why we are overriding clone method here and then define the calling of object class clone method? Okay, so the reason behind this is because the clone method defined inside the object class is of protected type. The access modifier that they use is protected type, which means that method can be only accessible by using inheritance. Means that method is coming here, but that is still of protected type. So if you will try to call that directly using association by creating the object of student and then try to call that clone method, it will not get execute, right? So for that reason, what we are doing, we are basically increasing the scope of clone method by overriding it and making it public, so that this method could be called by using association as well, and that's how we are making call here. So without overriding it, you cannot directly call it by using association, and that's the reason we have to override clone method that is coming from object class. This is all about cloning, and we are going to learn in upcoming video the difference between shallow cloning and deep cloning.